Hello, everyone. Welcome to Back to Battle City podcast. My name is Patrick, and today I have our guest August here with us. It's going to be a very fun interview we're going to be doing here. We're going to be talking about a bunch of different things. August has had some experience playing in the competitive level. Also wanted to talk about some things that we discussed earlier, actually, August, in regards to underplayed decks as well, and a variety of other topics. But before we get into that, August, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Of course, thank you so much for having me. I've been super excited all day.
Oh, well, awesome. Well, I'm glad we're here to finally do it. I know we were trying to work through the schedule, but we're here and we made it happen. So awesome. Well, I want to start off with a really easy question for you. Okay. How long have you been playing Yu-Gi-Oh for, and how long at a competitive level?
So I first got into Yu-Gi-Oh around the Duel Monsters era when the anime was airing. When I was a young lad, I fell out of Yu-Gi-Oh getting older, but I would say I got back into it around 2017, 2018, up more at the competitive level. And I've been a happy part of this community ever since.
Well, that's awesome. That's great. That's funny that you say that. I think you and I are a part of a very similar group where we grew up with the anime, we played it, but then, as we get older, we tend to put things down sometimes. But again, with technology and media and everything else, we find a way to kind of go back into some of our old passions. So I think it's great that you and I are very alike in the sense where we've found that love again for this game. So that's really cool. So, and you said you've been playing, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just want to make sure I understood it correctly. You said you've been playing competitively since, was it 2017?
Yeah, 2017, 2018 around.
Gotcha, around that time frame. And what kind of, I know you had shared some details with me, but for anyone who's listening, what are some of those competitions that you've been a part of?
So during the 2017, 2018, I really only went to locals. I was just getting back into the game at that time, so I wasn't super confident in deck building or even really strategy, just playing the game in general. But I would say and this is going to sound old school, but I was a Brotherhood of the Fire Fist player through and through. I had some Tri-Brigade cards in there at the time, but I was a Fire Fist gamer all the way.
And how did that translate when you were playing in locals? I mean, I know you said that you kind of you were a bit novice to like deck building and stuff. So I'm sure it sounded that you were very passionate about that deck, but how did that fare when you first started out trying to go into competitions then?
I would say at first, not super well. My deck was slow. It was cobbled together. It wasn't very, very streamlined, but after going to locals once or twice a week, thankfully I had a good locals down in Madison. They all helped me. People lent me cards. They helped me. They showed me how really to deck build, at least better for the time. And my deck building improved, but I stayed on Brotherhood of the Fire Fist that whole time. So I was at a disadvantage either way, but you could always sneak some games off of somebody when you flip up your continuous drop. My Beast Warrior gets 1,000 attack points, and you win the game.
Yeah. I kind of ran into that situation myself. I've only been to a couple locals recently, so I think I'm a little bit earlier in my quote unquote Yu-Gi-Oh career than say like where you are right now. So I've only been to a couple, but I remember the first one I went to, I thought I was going to be the clever guy who showed up with a Nurse Burn deck. I'm like, man, this thing is so cool. Funny enough, I won the first game. But after that, I was just completely decimated. I didn't even show up with a side deck. I didn't even know what that was at the time. I was just like, oh, okay, this is just what I do. So, and I also think that it's interesting that what you're saying about like trying to keep that same deck that you work with and just try to take it as far as you can. I think over the many like archetypes that I've tried to play, there's just some that don't do as well as some of the other meta decks, but you just try to take this passion that you have for one archetype and take it as far as you can go. So that's pretty cool. Awesome. Go ahead.
If you don't mind my bring something up, you brought up playing archetypes that aren't as well suited in any given format or meta. A good friend of mine, since we've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh, he has stuck with this guns. He's been playing Odd Eyes the whole time. Not even like a Pendulum Soup type of deck. He just Odd Eyes Performer Pal, straight way through. And I do got to give him props for that. I'm going to send him your way when we're all done, but he stuck to his guns this whole time. He still plays the same deck, and it's just really nice to see that that's his favorite deck, and he still plays it.
Man, you make it sound like it's a marriage. I mean, that is cool. That is impressive. Let me ask you, why do you, and I'd love to have the opportunity to chat with him, but why do you think, as a friend of him, why do you think that is? Is just his passion for it, or he just likes to try to do obstacles with just a core set of tools and see what he can accomplish? I
of course it's his favorite deck, and he's not so much the type of player to be like, I'm going to play the meta because that's what's powerful. Right. He likes to take the cards he likes and and he tries to. I apologize. I lost my train of thought. He takes the Odd Eyes archetype and the Performa Pals and just pilots them really well.
Gotcha.
Which I think only does come with time and practice and a willingness to accept that not every card in your deck is 100% the best. Right. And your deck isn't the best, and that's okay.
Yeah. I can definitely understand that, and I think there's something to appreciate there with that, because I think a lot of people play meta decks. I mean, and me included. I try to play with what's recent as well, especially if you're trying to stay competitive. But I think it's really great. I've met a lot of players like, nope, I played this deck and this is it. This is the archetype that I choose to stick with. Or I might do like a splash or something of some other stuff in between. But I play this because this is the reason why. They say I play this because it's fun. And that's something I really appreciate, because then your focus isn't so much on necessarily winning. You can, and it feels good to win, but just being able to play that type of mechanics with whatever the archetype is, I think is really cool.
I definitely agree. It makes the game feel more like, at least the way I feel like it was supposed to, right? It's a trading card game. You sit down, you have some fun, you play with your buddies, and yeah, you want to go to events, you want to go to tournaments, you want to win. Of course, everyone likes winning. I agree with you. Mm-hmm. But I do think a lot of players, at least in the Yu-Gi-Oh community, and not really, on the stage at the feature match or able to go to YCSs, just should sit down and have a good game. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who it was I was speaking to the other day, but they were showing me, I guess, in the Japanese version of the TV show. I think they said it was after like episode 50 of the original series. They had like a quick prelude or preamble. It just showed a quick title. It said, "Play fair and have fun." Right, and I love how they included that at the beginning, just to be able to show like, hey guys, just remember this is a game. So. Yeah, I agree. That's cool. Well, let me ask you, because this kind of brought me into another question that I had here. Why Yu-Gi-Oh? Right? When there's so many other TCGs out there, I know that you said you grew up with the anime, but have you had exposure to other TCG card games, and why do you have a passion for Yu-Gi-Oh?
Absolutely. I've had some exposure with Magic the Gathering. I think a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players kind of dip their toes in Magic the Gathering at some point. At least a lot of the players that I've spoken to and that I've met personally. I have had family members play Magic the Gathering and family members' partners play Magic. I tried the One Piece trading card game. I'm a big One Piece fan. Mm-hmm. I am keeping my eye on Alestrals right now. I think that looks really interesting. But I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically caught my attention. The big reason being from the anime, right? I started with Duel Monsters. I unfortunately missed GX. 5Ds is my all-time favorite. And then I believe it was Arc V with the Galaxy Eyes monsters and the Photon monsters. And I don't know, it really caught my eye again at that time in my life. Just like, this can be a way to express yourself, right? Deck building and sitting down and playing with your friends. And this is going to sound cheesy, but really believing in the heart of the cards. I know it's cheesy, but I do believe that if you love the game, you love what you're playing, and you play well, your cards will help you. I know that's silly. I know that's not how it works, but I like to believe that.
I don't think that's silly at all. I can appreciate that perspective, just because for me personally, I'm not the best, but I try to do what I can. And I think when someone spends a lot of time like investing on how to do deck building and stuff, and you're like, okay, statistically this would be the best deck or the best amount of cards to play in this deck, or whatever the count is, so on and so forth. You try to control the parameters, but once you're actually in a duel and let's say it's like not working out, there's like only 1 or 2 cards in your deck, and you have like, I don't know, somewhere between 25 and 30 cards left in your deck. You're like, heart of the cards, like you start quoting the motto like at this point. Hopefully it works out.
And I've seen that all through remote duels and going to locals and regionals. That's it. When you're in that top deck situation where, it's turn 4 or 5 in the duel, time is winding down, you're in game 3, and you really go, all right, this is it. You put your hand on top of your deck and you really go heart of the cards 100%. And I think that's a really nice unifying force for all Yu-Gi-Oh players of all skill levels.
Yeah.
Is that top deck situation, right?
Yeah. And tell me if I'm wrong, but I think there's even a valuable lesson when you draw that card. If it is the card that you need, it feels great. But if it doesn't, it still somehow feels like it's a feeling that you would get even from Yu-Gi-Oh! Because sometimes people in the show didn't get the card they needed, and there was consequences to that. But they had to accept it, and also you as a player, you accept it too. So I think that's interesting. But go ahead. I think you were on to something else you were going to say.
Absolutely. But even just like you said, you draw your next card, and even if it is not quite the card you were hoping for, at least the difference to me between a really good player and just a good player is obviously, you draw a brick, there's nothing you could do about it, right? But you draw that card that's kind of there, but not really. At least the difference to me is being able to do what you can, right? And not necessarily going, this isn't the card I needed, I'm going to scoop it up. Yeah. Right? I feel like, at least now, with the way people see time rules and all different kinds of things of that nature, duelists are very quick to just give up. Yeah. And I, myself included, I definitely fall victim to, I'm lower in life points, I'm low in card advantage, I draw my card, it's not the one I was thinking of, and I go, you got it. Let's go next. And I think it's important to not just give up, right? You got to play it out, because you never know. Maybe your opponent makes a mistake, maybe you do something they weren't expecting, and you throw them off, and you take the game.
When you're looking in that situation where it's like, okay, it seems like the writings are on the wall, how often do you make that decision to say, hey, I'm going to play this through to the end, or no, I'm going to cut my losses, let's just move on to the next game? Like how often do you go back and forth between those decisions? Or is there like a specific scenario you're like, yep, no, I'll keep running this through?
At least to me, having been in some of those, like, I'll call them medium pressure situations where you're still in at the regional level or a remote local level, right, where you're playing competitively against other people that you might not be super familiar with, and you want to win, you want that prizing. And I think it's very situational. If you're down a game, right, you've lost game 1 and it's game 2, I would play it out at that point. But if you're it's game 2, you've won the first game, you still have game 3 to pick it back up, then time becomes a bigger factor. I think the time rules are fine, in my personal opinion. It's just another part of the game. That's how I see it, right? I was talking with my partner about this, and I was explaining it at a base level. I think people don't like the time rules because that's another layer you have to think about when you're competing. And there's already so much going into it. You decide what deck you're playing, you have to pick your side deck. Even extra deck space is so specific now that it takes a lot of planning and a lot of forethought that people aren't willing, but don't want that extra layer of, what if I go into time? And that's just as important. It's just as an important aspect of the game that, yes, sometimes people do scummy things, and I think those players specifically should be, I don't want to use the word punished because it's a little silly, but that's what happens. You get into time, those are the rules now.
Right. Yeah. I think that's interesting that you bring that up. I remember recently I was watching a video. Forgive me, I don't remember the YouTuber's name, but I believe the name of their channel is APS.
Yes.
Yeah. I listened to a lot of their videos, and I remember recently they had brought up that topic about time and how to fix that issue. They had a proposal, and he even said, like, this is just my opinion. I'm not sure that if this is necessarily the right way, but he was saying the idea of just getting rid of side decking completely. I can't remember if he said that you could exchange decks instead of doing side decking, but the idea is that if you remove side decking, which can be up to 3 minutes, that's at least time that you have back now to go towards your duel. But obviously the con to that is that if you're playing against a certain deck and your deck is not equipped with the cards you need, and the cards that you do need are in your side deck and you can't swap them out, then obviously that leaves you a disadvantage for the entire round, right? So curious to know what you think about that one.
I do believe I know the video you're talking about. I think I'm gonna agree and disagree. I think that people sitting down and taking 3 or 4 minutes to side deck is a little disingenuous, because you look at the clock and okay, I know Fiendsmith Lacrima just got banned, right? People were sitting down and side decking for 3, 4, 5 minutes and just Lacrima burning, and that's the end of the game. I think that intentional building of your side deck to win you the game in time is dishonest, but I think the side deck as a concept is very good, because like you said, if your deck isn't very well equipped for a BC matchup, you can switch cards in and out so that you have a better chance of winning, or you might be able to catch your opponent off guard with a card that they might not have tested against or they might not have seen before. So that's happened to me.
What about that idea then of complete deck swap then? Like, okay, you have these decks, you can't change any cards inside of them, so in between matches you can only just go from deck to deck and that is it. Do you think that's too much of a hyperbolic proposal, you think, or what do you think about that?
I do think it's a little bit too much of a hyperbolic proposal. Now, I could do that, right? I feel like I could do that very well, because I like to play 2, 3, 4, 5 different decks so that I'm familiar with a variety of strategies. But that then almost isn't fair to the people who've, spent thousands of hours and dollars investing in what's the best, right? That almost feels like you've spent all your time, you spent your money on the cards you want and that are good, but you have to bring 40 or 60 more cards, right? I do think there is a middle ground. I don't know what it is, but I think side decking is very important. I just think that players themselves need to be more willing to play in time.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And not just like what I was saying, not being scummy about it is the best way I can put it. Like, I have a friend, he plays Runic. He sides Munin the Runic Wings 4 times specifically. And that's all you got to do. You play your Runic spell, you do that, you go to the end phase, you win the game because you've gained life points. Yeah. It makes sense when you're playing a Runic deck, but I don't remember what game it was, but a gentleman had sided in 6 or 9 Runic cards and that extra deck monster 4 times. It makes sense as a strategy because time is a part of the game, but doing it on purpose doesn't feel right.
Right. It's one of those things like you get away with it, but no one feels good about it. And I think, like, especially if you are the person who in the net result is receiving the blunt end of that situation, that's a person who feels worse. And the person who does do it, like, you kind of not sympathize, but you understand what they're trying to do, and this is a competition. They're trying to do whatever they can to win. But you just wish there was, I don't want to say that someone is dishonorable by doing that, but you just wish there was a way where, like, hey, we were just playing the game. Like, if there was no time, like if the duel just went to the end, that would be great. And that way you wouldn't have to worry about those parameters. You're truly playing someone against for their skills rather than trying to work around that time constraint. But yeah, I get that. Well, hey, let me ask you another question if I can. This is on a related topic. I know we were talking specifically about time, and I know there are some players, and it can be for a variety of reasons. They either feel that Yu-Gi-Oh has either become toxic or it's too complex, right? Those are kind of two separate things, but the biggest complaints that I've heard from different players. And I will say, me personally, coming back into the game, when I saw, I mean, I was playing against the computer, so when I saw a Link Summon happen for the first time, I was like, what the hell is this? Now we're seeing, what's this pendulum? What is all this stuff? And it was just, to get my grip around it and understand it, it just took some time. But do you feel that Yu-Gi-Oh is either too complex for new players, or do you feel Yu-Gi-Oh is too toxic right now in its current state?
So thankfully, I have a very interesting perspective because I'm trying to teach my partner how to play Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Mm-hmm. And that has given me almost a different perspective on how the game functions at a base level, right? For a new player. I won't say it's too complex, because I don't think it is, right? I think once you sit down and say to yourself, okay, I am going to read all of these cards, and I'm going to take the time to understand what I'm trying to do within the parameters of my cards. What I think becomes what makes it complicated is who you're sitting across from, right? I'm willing to go slow and answer questions and help my partner understand specific things that can happen in the game, right? Like timing, I think, is very difficult to grasp in Yu-Gi-Oh! When you can activate something, when you can't activate something. Like Solemn Judgment, still to this day, is I barely understand it, right? And I'm a Dinomorphia player, and I can barely grasp Solemn Judgment. So I think it is a reasonable difficulty wherein a new player can sit down and go, okay, I understand what all of these words say on the card, but how does it work? Right?
Yeah, what is that interaction? How does that connect to the rest of the other pieces on the board, right?
And I think that brings me to the next part of your question, Yu-Gi-Oh being toxic. I don't want to say yes, because I love this game with all of my heart and soul. I got my Team Samurai X1 deck box sitting right next to me. I love this game with all of my... I bought a second desk for remote duels, specifically. So I love the game a lot. My desktop background, I wish I could show it to you, is Animador and Archosaur. That's what it is. So I'm a big Yu-Gi-Oh guy. But unfortunately, veteran players aren't willing to slow down for those even adults or children. I don't think it matters. They aren't willing to take that time and answer those questions, because that's how I learned. I went to locals and I asked people questions because I didn't know. But if you go to locals now, or you try and do some kind of remote event, those players just want you to be at their level, right? They don't want to slow down and at my locals, there are 8 or 9 kids. They're middle school kids. They come in and they bring the structure decks, right? They bring the Red Dragon Archfiend structure deck, the Fire King structure deck. They don't know what to do. They don't know the complexities of how my deck might interact with theirs. That's not something they know. And I've seen them get visibly upset because their opponent won't answer their question because they don't know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's super discouraging. That I wouldn't want to go back if I'm 15, 16 years old and I convinced my parents to let me get a structure deck and go to locals. And I ask hey, I'm new. I don't really know how this works. What does this do? How does that work? Can you explain that to me? And your opponent goes, you should already know this. I wouldn't really want to go back. And then I don't want the game to die, but in 7-8 years and you don't have any new players coming in because no one will take the time to teach them, you don't have a game anymore.
Yeah. So that leads into another interesting thing as well. Me personally, like on that topic though, I've tried to find ways to mitigate that. I tend to be someone who's a bit of an extrovert when it's about being in social places with different people, in certain regards, I should say. But like when I went to my first local, I didn't go there with the intention of winning. So I just went there essentially to ask questions, right? Even though I'm dueling, like try to ask questions and just be really friendly. And I remember there was one person even before the local event that I just happened to see there the next time when I went to that event. I went to one of our local shops. This guy was like looking at a card. It cost like $5, and I heard him talking about some stuff that I didn't understand. But he was like, "Yeah, that card. I don't know if I want to do that right now. I want to, but I can't do it right now." What's the cost of a coffee nowadays? It feels like it's $5 anyways. So it's like, "Hey man, I got you. Don't worry, I'll buy it." Like, no, you don't have to. Like, please, I insist. And by doing that small little gesture, when I saw them at locals, they actually helped me out more with even helping me try to build my deck, even though, yes, it was nurse burn. They're like, hey, look for what you got. This might be the best that you can do kind of situation. So sometimes for me, I try to extend an olive branch, even though nothing's happened yet first, to try to gain people's, I don't want to say influence, but to make it so that way there's an approachability between the two of us. So yeah, and I think the other thing for me that I've noticed, I don't know if you agree or disagree, so far from my interaction on the Discord server that we've been a part of, seems like a lot of people have been pretty welcoming, especially for remote duels. It's not a competition. You're just playing casually. I've noticed a lot of people, if you tell them like, yeah, I'm getting back into it, they're pretty welcoming and willing to teach you. Do you feel the same way about that, or?
Absolutely. I think Discord communities as a whole are fantastic, but I think you go in these Discord communities and it's a place where everyone's just trying to play Yu-Gi-Oh! That's bottom line, right? Everyone's trying to play Yu-Gi-Oh! In one way or another. And I wholeheartedly agree. You come in, hey, I just start, like, when I was trying to learn Branded, I went to the Branded Discord server. Hey guys, I got ABC question. Could you guys help me out? I had 18 DMs after that. Yeah, man, I got you. You want to hop on a call? I can help you out. We could go on Nexus, whatever, EDO, whatever, man. So absolutely. I think with the advent of Discord communities in our post-COVID era, I'll use some big words here, I think people are a lot more willing online than they are offline, because there's a little bit more, I use the word distance, right? Like, yes, the two of us are sitting here talking, having a conversation, right? But I'm in the comfort and the safety of my own home, and you are in the comfort and safety of your home or your recording area, right? I think that distance, that space between players allows for that willingness to be kind.
Right, and I'm sure it doesn't, I'm sure it does help the fact that you don't have to worry about it being a competitive landscape as well. Like, you can just, hey, we're gonna have a casual duel, and all those elements combined kind of help out.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the casual nature of, hey man, I just need some help. Can you test ABC scenario with me? Oh yeah, sure, let's go. Oh, of course. And you boot up whatever you want to play on, and you just do it.
Yep.
100%.
Yeah, I actually, so funny you say that. I purchased the new core Exodia deck from Infinite Forbidden, and I had like the main core pieces, but trying to build out the rest of the deck, I was kind of like at a loss. And I had purchased this thing like a month ago, but I was on Discord. I was like, hey, you guys mind helping me out? And just like everyone on the chat, like let's get the cards out. Let's see what you got. Because one, it's exciting because people haven't seen all those cards yet in real life, so they were excited to see that. And then they started piecing together with whatever else I had to put it together. So yeah, that was really cool. Go ahead.
To bounce off of that, when I love ritual decks. I put it on there. I'm a big Voiceless Voice fan. I think ritual decks are super underrated right now, and understandably so. They're in the middle, I'll say, of power, right? But I did the same thing. I went in chat and I said, "Hey guys, I'm trying to learn Voiceless. Can anyone help me out?" Right? I don't have all the cards yet, but I want to see if it's worth my while. And right there, you see 5 people typing, "Let's go, absolutely!" And next thing I know, I'm in a call with 5 people I've never met before, trying to help me out.
How do you feel about proxies though? Because I know some players, I personally, I don't mind. And when I say proxies, I mean specifically in a casual environment, non-competitive. Just like, hey, I want to buy these cards, or I plan to buy them soon. Till then, I have a proxy. Are you okay if I play with a proxy? Are you usually like, how do you feel about that? Would you say, what do you got? Can you play with what you have? Or are you usually welcoming to players who want to incorporate some of those types of proxy cards into their decks?
So, a fantastic question, to be completely honest. I'm a big advocate of proxies. You shouldn't be proxying your whole deck, right? You shouldn't come and sit down in a casual environment with a 40-card proxy deck and your 15-card extra deck. It's all proxies. I disagree with that. But, if you want to play, let's take Yubel, right? A deck I think is the best deck in the game, right?
Love it. I'm currently waiting for some of my cards to show up. I have half of it. I'm waiting for the rest of it to show up. So please, I want to hear it.
I got priced out of Yubel. I went out, I got all of the Nightmare Pains, of the Spirit of Yubels, Incarnate, all of them, all of the new cards, and then Nightmare Throne dropped, and it was $50 a copy.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to play it. I think Yubel is really cool. I wasn't into Yu-Gi-Oh! When GX was around, but you can't go wrong with a sick anime deck, right? It was good. And then Phantom of Yubel dropped, secret rare, $60 a copy, $50 a copy. It made me really sad. So I would have loved to sit down in a casual environment with my Yubel proxies and say, "Hey man, you just want to play a quick game?" I think yes, right? You proxy two 5 cards, whatever, it's fine, right? But I think the proxies need to be of a decent quality, right? You can't walk in with a proxy that just says the name of the card and a crudely drawn picture, right?
It's hand drawn. It's not even. It's with a pencil.
Yeah,
on
right.
A piece of white paper. Yeah.
Like I don't think, like, one of my buddies just bought actually some really nice Fiendsmith proxies. They look real. You put them in a card sleeve, you can't tell that they're fake, right? And I think it was fantastic. I thought it was a little silly because I have a printer, but I was like, that's actually a really good idea. And we sat down and we were able to play it. He went, I don't really like Fiendsmith Snake Eye. I'm going to play something else. And I think being able to try the best deck or try any deck before you really have to drop $1,100, $1,200, I think is a good thing, right? Because what if you don't like that deck? Oh, well, you just dropped $1,000. You're going to play it, right? I certainly would. If I spent a whole grand on cardboard, I'm going to play them. So I think proxies are good and can be good at a casual level.
Yeah, no, that is I definitely have similar feelings to that sentiment, especially when it comes to cost. I think, how do I say this and tread lightly on it? I feel that with the market and how it is, especially with cards, it's exactly how you said. It's very difficult for someone to have to make a decision. Oh, I gotta buy this card, and they buy it, and then maybe they buy multiple, and they spend a ton of money on it. And after they do that, they play, and they're like, but I don't like it, or I don't like what it's done to my deck, or you know what, I just don't like this card in general. Because I see cards like archetypes. There's a lot of people who will play the same type of archetypes, but there's always a little bit of a variation. It's kind of like a car. Like one person might like this car, another person might not like it. So because you have those different types of variations, I like that idea of try before you buy. I think proxies, like, given, yes, they have controversy, I think it is good that people can at least try to see how it works, especially in a casual environment, non-competitive, to make sure that, yeah, I do want this, and then they'll go spend the money to buy the legitimate version of it. I personally would advocate for that as well. I'm sure there's probably people listening who might disagree with our opinion, but I agree 110% with that.
And
yeah.
And I think, kind of taking a step back to the toxicity of the Yu-Gi-Oh community, right? I think it's just a little important to remember it is just an opinion, right? That's something I would like to see, that's something you would like to see, and not everyone has to agree. I think that's something that's kind of gotten lost in the advent of our Discord communities. It feels like, oh, well, everyone else has this opinion, so I do too.
Yeah.
No, you don't. And I just think that's important to bring up.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. It's important to have enough individuality and thought for yourself and what you feel in those regards. And I think that the world today is very polarized, right? So if it's polarized enough already, like, try to keep it as peaceful and civil as possible when it comes to something as simple as a very, very followed and loved game, and then if people have opinions, they have opinions. If you agree with them or not, that's fine, but you don't need to be hostile with one another, and it's at least worth having those types of discussions. So I think that's good. The next thing I did want to ask, this is kind of proxy adjacent, right? So how much time, I know I didn't have a chance to ask you ahead of time. I know that, but you do a lot of, do you play Master Duel at all, or any of like these simulator type games?
I do.
Okay.
I love playing Master Duel. It is a great way for me, at least, to interact with Yu-Gi-Oh on a casual level, but also not like a step above, right? Where it's not necessarily super casual, but I can jump into ranked, right, and feel satisfied with my gameplay, right? And I can outplay knowing that it's another person, right? And of course, it's a gacha game, right? That's a whole different discussion. But I do think the simulators are a good stepping stone.
Good. Well, let me go off of that then. And I agree. I'm the same way, I think, but it's a slightly different. For me, it's like Master Duel is a way for me to be a part of the Yu-Gi-Oh community without necessarily having to wear a shirt. You know what I mean? When you're on a remote duel, let me make sure I look okay and decent. But like I was saying, I wanted to bring that up first and see how this was adjacent to proxies. I know that there are simulators out there like YG Omega, and now there's this most recent one that people are talking about. It's MD Pro 3. Which is almost looks identical to Master Duel. I don't know how you feel about those simulators when there's also Master Duel. For me, I will at least say, in my opinion, I want to get your feedback, that Master Duel is a great platform in terms of a simulator. I think it's the best. There it is, right? It's Konami. There, of course, it's going to serve its customers the best way in terms of an experience. But I feel that it just costs so much in terms of crafting to be able to build the decks that you want to build, right? So for me, I always, like, if I hear about a new deck, I will try playing on YG Omega first and trying to build a deck in that and test it out before I make that commitment to say, well, how are we going to spend our gems? Let's spend all of our gems opening packs, disassembling stuff, and then crafting a new deck that I want. So is that a strategy that you would take as well, or that you would suggest, or how would you approach that?
So I take a similar approach, not exactly the same. So the way I kind of approach Master Duel is, at least with, crafting and dismantling and kind of managing your resources appropriately, is, so I will give the example of like the Ragnaraikas, right? They just dropped on Master Duel. And I have been wanting recently to play Plant Link. I miss Sunseed Jess in the TCG. I think she's one of the best players in the game. It was devastating when she wasn't playing anymore. It made me sad, right? We lost a powerful player, right? And then I see in my recommended she's putting out plant content again. So I like to do research, right? I think YouTube is a great place to do that, right? So all right, who's playing this? Let me find a list. And then I almost take to a simulator. I try to stay away from simulators when I'm preparing for Master Duel, because to me it's the clear divide between TCG and OCG, right? Master Duel is closer to OCG, and obviously the simulators are kind of geared, at least for us here, the way we use them for the TCG, right?
Correct.
And I look at a lot of YouTube content. I think about it a lot. I spend a lot of time. Do I really want to even play this, right? Or is it just because it's the new cards, right? That's a big question in my head.
Am I having FOMO, or is there something about this I actually resonate with?
Exactly, right? I think that's a great way to put it. So, like, I'm a big Joshua Schmidt fan, and after spending probably 12 plus hours in the past 2 days watching Paleozoic gameplay, I said, you know what? I've been thinking about this for 2 weeks now. I'm going to build it on Master Duel. I dismantled basically all of my URs to play Paleo, and I'm having a great time.
No regrets, right? You're like,
no.
You're never like, do I want to dismantle this? And you're like, nope, go for it.
No, I was playing Centurion Bastiles. I wasn't having fun, so I said, you know what? Let's play the game on a completely different axis. Let's go gambling.
Yeah.
And it was very rewarding for me. But I think taking that time to appropriately do the research, right? It is very time consuming to sit down in front of your phone or in front of your computer, or even on TV, doing that research and seeing if you actually enjoy what the deck has to offer. Is at least something that I take heavy into consideration, because I don't want to spend any money on Master Duel. That's just not something I'm about.
Right. I'll go through all the solo missions first and get all the daily missions before I spend any money.
I got all of the gates 100%ed. They're all cleared. I did all the missions. I do my dailies. I suffer through the Duelist Cup every month to get the gems.
Yeah.
And, I think it's worth it. It gives me something to do. It gives me a way to interact with Yu-Gi-Oh! At a super easy level, right? I'm not spending hours going, oh man, what side card do I need? That kind of brings us back to side decking, right? What side card do I need? Is my deck, I got to think about matchup coverage and what people are playing. I can load into ranked, and what you get is what you get. So I think that's a positive, at least, of best of one. I've heard a lot of complaints about Master Duel. I'm sure you have too, but I try to look at it, the positive aspects, as much as I can.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way. It's funny enough, because before Master Duel I was playing Legacy of Duelists. I guess that was the game before. So it's never a 3-round, at least. Well, I don't know about online, because I never played online, but like, you play the story mode, it's always just one duel and that's it. So going into Master Duel and playing online, it's one duel, that's it. I thought that was normal. So when I went to locals, it was like, oh, we're gonna play again now after I lost won the first game. I was like, huh? So that was a bit of a shock, but I personally think both of it have their own ways of being entertaining and fun. So I think my grievances with Master Duel just more so has to come with the idea that if you want to be able to build an entirely new deck and you've gone through all the missions and everything, I can see and understand why people talk about it being like, oh, it's a pay to play. Because yeah, once you've done all those things, to be able to get or create a deck quick enough, sometimes people may consider that option. So I get that. But aside from that, I really do like, and I think it's really good. Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, I want to switch the conversation to something else here, if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
focusing more on just maybe some advice that you would give to anyone looking to start going to like locals and competing. There's a lot of people who play casual, whether it's remotely or whether it's on Master Duel, wherever these channels are that they're coming from, and they decide, hey, I want to start competing. What are some just like fundamental, like looking back at your history when you started playing, what are some fundamental things, hey, do's and don'ts, and these small little things that you can do will just help you improve your, not necessarily your gameplay, but your experience of competing in general?
I would say be willing to stop your opponent. And by that I mean, if you might not have any interruptions, but if my opponent plays a card I've never seen before, I'm gonna be like, can I read that? Right? Be willing to do that instead of just sitting there like, whoa, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Be willing to go, hold on, I don't understand. I'm not understanding. What does that do? Or can I read your card? I think that's important. That's not as easy in like a remote format, but even like asking your opponent, what was that card you just played? Let me check what it does, right? Being willing to almost stop your opponent mid-game. I know that sounds silly because a lot of those things are timed, but if you don't know what your opponent's doing, it feels bad, right? That's the easiest way I can explain it. It feels bad getting lost almost.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because a lot of those things happened to me kind of the first local event that I played. Is like, I don't know what's happening in front of me. I'm just accepting it. I'm going to just wait for them to attack, and then let's see if my magic cylinders goes through, It's kind of like, I don't know. But I have been learning, especially on the Discord, to just be able to ask those questions. Do you think there should be some level of responsibility, though, of that player of like, hey, play enough remotely, or you should do X amount of hours playing in a casual environment before you consider there, so that way like you avoid those situations from happening? Or do you see, even in your experience, you still like get really seasoned players who are still like taking the moment to say, hey, time out, can I read that really quickly and just understand what's going on?
I think it's a little bit of both, to be completely honest. I do think it is on like us as the players going to these events to have a certain amount of knowledge before you go, all right, I'm going to go to an event, right? But it is also definitely like, I lost my train of thought again. I apologize.
No, you're good. You're good. I know I covered a lot of ground in that.
No, yeah, it's completely okay. I also think it's important for your opponent to be willing to answer your question, right? That's a baseline respect thing, right? Like
it's courtesy.
Yeah, yes, that's a better word. It's courtesy. I don't want to win because you don't know what I'm doing. That's not, I'm going to sound cheesy again. That's not the spirit of dueling, right? That's almost like, oh, I'm very Bandit Keith, right? I'll use Bandit Keith is a good example. Yeah. I'm going to pull one over on you. I'm going to get you, right? It feels very, not dishonest, but like a little shady, right? Like when the first time I ever played saw Rika Concon, I was like, what does this do? My opponent just kept going and wouldn't even stop. So I was like, hold on. Why do you get to use my monster? What do you mean my monster? Let's, and they didn't even stop. So I think it's both on you, the player, going to the event, but also whomever is sitting across from you when you sit down and the judge says go, right? I think it's both. You doing your due diligence to know how to play, right? But you can't know every interaction and every card. That's impossible.
I understand that. This brings up a question that I'm interested to get your take on this one here. Do you think there is a responsibility from Konami? And look, forgive me for my ignorance, because I haven't had as much experience in the competitive realm or even with playing in different formats. But do you think it's like Konami's responsibility to say, hey, if you're this type of player, you should really consider these types of formats, right? So if you're just getting back into the game, stick with this. And then kind of once you've like excelled in that format and you build a foundation, then you should like kind of rank up, if that makes sense. But in terms of mechanics that are available, I'm just trying to think of like what are ways that makes it so that way seasoned players are playing with other seasoned players and they don't have to worry about educating a new player, especially if they're not someone who's into teaching. And then how do you also give a fair chance to someone who's like, hey, I'm getting my foot in the water, how can I get into this? Because I know there's the local, and local's kind of like the low bar and everything else. But in terms of like formats, do you think or wish there was a better way, or do you think like it's fine the way it is?
You know, that's actually really interesting you bring that up. I actually have never thought about that, so that's really interesting. I don't necessarily think it's on Konami necessarily to have almost like this is where you should start. But as I think about that, it would make sense if the people trying to sell you this game are also trying to sell you on trying to make you a lifelong player, right? That would make sense to me, right? If they want you to start in like past formats like Edison or half format or toss, right? I think those things are a really good stepping stone for what Yu-Gi-Oh is now, right? Because it's a very gradual progression, at least in my eyes, right? Kind of having experienced some of the power creep of Yu-Gi-Oh, I think that would be helpful. And from a business standpoint, sell more cards.
Yeah.
Right? But on the other side of that coin, is it really the responsibility of the company to go, here's where you should start, right? We're somewhere else, right, currently, but you should start back here, right? Back in time, in quotes, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a very difficult and multifaceted issue that I think is a little unique to Yu-Gi-Oh! And I've brought this up in my friend group specifically. I think we spoke about this earlier, of course, with Discord communities, right? I think those places are where a lot of players are getting their foundational skills, and that's fantastic. The barrier to entry to those Discord communities isn't necessarily gate-kept, but it's really nebulous, right? Because if you're just getting into Yu-Gi-Oh! And you don't really use Discord that much, you don't even know I didn't know what Discord was for the longest time. If you don't even know what that is, it feels impossible. Or even going on YouTube and looking up how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! There isn't a lot of new content about how to play the game. You can look up how to play a deck, but that doesn't show you how to play the game, right? So my answer to your question is I think it is the responsibility of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community as a whole, and obviously not necessarily content creators, but I think the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community being willing to create beginner content. Right, beginner-friendly content.
Right now, it's currently serving its existing players rather than it is trying to bring in new players. Do I have that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting because I can't remember how I saw something about videos on like remote duel setups, which is cool to see because that means people are trying to get online, right? But the how to play videos, it feels like it's the same how to play videos I've seen before. And this is not a hit on any content player, and I'm not saying or content maker, and I'm not saying I could do it any better. But some of the videos on the how-tos just leaves a lot of information out or leaves things for ambiguity, so that makes it difficult. And then you also, what is it called, the Yu-Gi-Oh! 2-player starter set deck? Which I know a lot of people like. It's great. It comes with what is it, AA Zeus? But aside from that, in terms of teaching people how the game works, I don't know if I could say it could confidently do that. I think for me, playing Legacy of Duelists was great in the story mode because the entire first part was Duelist Kingdoms. So it was rules that I just need to refamiliarize myself with, but I already kind of knew, even though I just kind of had to reach into the pockets of my brain of like how this game was played that way. But then once I went into GX, okay, we went more into Fusion, and then when we started going to the other ones, that's like, oh, this is a new mechanic. So it allowed these like layers of like, here's the fundamentals, here's a new thing, here's a new thing, new thing, new thing, new thing. But in Master Duel, you don't see that. You just see like the solo modes of just like, hey, here's just like archetypes, which sometimes I feel can be a little bit of a disservice. That's the one thing I think Master Duel could have been better, is if they had solo modes that went in era order, so that way you played based on where you left off with the game and you can build your skills that way. So I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
No, I 100% agree with you. And I love the solo modes. I think they're really interesting. I sit and actually watch the cutscenes it takes like 45 minutes. Right? Yeah. I don't know if you sit there and watch them and you read all the lore about the different archetypes. I do. I think that's really cool. But it takes 45 minutes, right? Yeah. And I hear
we're talking about for one. That's right. We're talking about for one.
Just one of them. Exactly. Just one of them. You gotta sit there and you gotta read them. And it takes forever. And I can hear my college professors' voices echoing in my head, especially my one of my physical education professors. I won't say his name, but the way you learn any skill developmentally is via scaffolding. You have to build a base, and then you go to the next tier and the next tier, and the only way that you will properly develop that skill is if you build one layer at a time.
Yep.
And I can hear his voice in the back of my head. You know what I mean? You're still in school, so you know what I mean. You're sitting in lecture, you're taking notes, and your professor says something that catches your attention. You're like, huh, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if you've ever had one of those moments.
No, sure, of course. I feel like I get those once a week sometimes. Like I'm like, oh, that was profound, or that was interesting. It's like almost like an epiphany moment, but that sticks with you. And you're like, absolutely. Yep, that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And I 100% agree. I think it is a disservice to new players, just even like regular gamers, right? They're looking on Steam, they're looking for something new to play. Oh, what's this Master Duel thing? I saw the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, let me download it. And it doesn't tell you how to play the game at a base level. And I think
that's the biggest struggle Konami's going to have, is how do you get new players if you can't
introduce them properly?
Yeah, design a bridge specifically for those new players. That's the part where I feel like they have the biggest struggle with. So I agree. It's like, it's scared because like for me, I'm almost 34. I was introduced to the game, I think probably when I was like maybe 12, somewhere between 11 and 13. I can't remember when, but like if it's just all the same players, like the vacuum that we hold is going to get smaller and smaller. Like I think it is great that we picked up some new players and stuff, but like over time, what's going to happen? So I really am curious to see what Konami is going to do. I know they have that new VR game that they showed a demo of, and it's leaning a lot, it looks like, on the classic Yu-Gi-Oh kind of stuff. So I don't know. I guess I see that product and I don't know what it means for the future. It looks like they're trying to bring in older players, but what does that do for the new? You know?
I 100% agree with you. Taking a step back to the 2-player starter set, I have a little anecdote that I think highlights this issue really well. My buddy and I, who have gone to a multitude of different events, we've gone to locals for however long, we've done regional events, and we know how to play the game. So the two of us sat down and it was $20, which I thought was a little silly, but it was $20. So we sit down with our pre-constructed decks that you get in the 2-player set, and we played out. We read the little instruction booklet you get front to back, and we played the scripted duel, and we closed it up, and we put our cards down, and we didn't really get anything, right? It just brings you through a game, right? It doesn't actually tell you. It's too specific. That's the word I'm looking for, right?
And did it feel fun?
No, we
Yep.
were bored.
Problem.
We were bored, but we know how to play the game already. So
Mhm.
for us, if we're sitting there with a product designed for new players and we're bored, I wouldn't even ask someone who has never played Yu-Gi-Oh before to buy this product. It would be
Yeah.
like a shame, right?
So funny enough, I tried teaching my wife, and I was like, "How the hell am I going to teach her this game?" Because she sees me playing it. I'll be honest, it was more like me trying to say like, "Hey, let's try it to see if I can get her to be interested." And I had like on the fly, I had to try to decide how do I teach her what this game is. So we just started with 10 card deck of vanillas, like nothing but just vanillas. It was just beat stick going one after another, and then like you try to show spells or traps, and then obviously she's playing a trap when it should be a spell. So
How
it's
do
like
you?
understanding those complexities. It was difficult. The end result of that is she doesn't play it.
Yes, yes. I've had that issue myself where, and even I'll take my deck, right, and I
Mhm.
will lay out all of the cards, whatever, and I will, try and explain all of the information on the card. But even then, it's like, okay, I can read the text on the card, and because I can read, understand what all of these words say and what it
Yep.
means, but then like you can't explain very well how to put the puzzle together, and I don't have the answer. I've been trying to figure it out, but it's very difficult to sit down and talk to a microphone, and I've been trying to figure out a way, like a how-to series almost. I've been trying to figure out, but I can't nail it down, right? How do I break this down to a fundamental level? It's very difficult because, and that brings us all the way back to the beginning. Yu-Gi-Oh is complicated.
It is. It is very, very complicated, but it's like a complicated marriage. I'm not saying mine. Mine is great, honey. If you're watching this, we're doing great. but in the sense of like, there's so many complexities, but you just have this love for it, and you want it to see it do good, and you want to see how it turns out in the end, and that's why you stick with it. Yeah, yeah. Well, go ahead. I was going to ask a question, but I want to give you a second if you had something else.
Absolutely. A thought, like a light bulb, just went off in my head almost.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, come on, man! I hate when this happens. It's very similar. I had it very eloquently in my head. It's disappeared. What was your question? We'll move forward.
Okay, and if you think of it, let me know. That's no problem. So, the next question I wanted to ask you was, I know that you talked about when you go to locals, right? We were talking about tips and tricks about not being afraid to ask your opponent like questions or confirming, right? Trust and validate. But is there any other suggestions that you would give to anyone going into locals that you would suggest? I mean, I spoke to a player the other day. I'm just giving an example for further thought. Someone was like, if you go to locals, do not show up with a paper playmat. You are just going to get yourself reamed. Do not do that. And then there's other things as well. Other people have their suggestions, and I always love listening to them to see what people have to say. But any other suggestions that you would have aside from the one that you provided, and aside from the paper mat?
I think at least knowing what, right, like knowing what your cards do, right? It's a big, I'll use the word issue for lack of a better word, to show up to an event, right, to your locals, and it's an event, right? Like people show up, they pay. It's an event. To know what your cards do, and I don't want to say know what you're trying to do, but it's a strategy game, right? And it's important, as a player, to think about, what am I trying to do here, right, with these cards, right? What's the goal? Where am I going? My thought prior almost has come back to me. Yu-Gi-Oh is a game that puts a lot of I lost the word, but puts a lot on the player to almost do that research, right? How to play the game instead of you buy a structure deck and it tells you how to play.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of weight and pressure on the individual players to almost learn the game. So it makes it very ambiguous. Right? There is no, this is how you get started, which makes it hard. But I think for going to locals for the first time, knowing what your cards do, right? Having your strategy in your mind, right? Instead of just putting the cards on the field, right? That feels like a waste of time.
Yeah.
But a more general one, bring some deodorant. I just so like deodorant, snacks. I know a lot of local shops have drinks and snacks, but like I like to bring my own snacks, and I always ask. I go, hey, can I bring snacks in here? Can I bring food in here? Right, that's really important. Being willing to accept whatever your shop says. If your shop says no, you can't eat by the cards, you can't, right? I've seen people try to sneak their food back there, and they get in trouble. Right, so just being respectful to the card shop staff, right? They give you this space to play. You got to be respectful to them and respectful to other people in that you're still in a public place, right? You can't be yelling, can't be screaming.
Do you see a lot of drama like that? Do you see anyone who like goes over the edge like that? Has that happened?
It has happened, and of course it isn't as frequent as people like to make it out to be. It's normally one person, right, who's just maybe a jerk, right? They are just a little mean to whether it be the cashier or a new player, right? And I always go say something to them. I'm that kind of person, like, hey man, that was messed up, right? Because that puts a little bit of social pressure on that person to be like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't be yelling at this 13-year-old because they don't know what Fiendsmith Engraver does. Yeah,
I gotta ask, how old was this person? Because you've already got me into the story, so now I'm just trying to imagine the situation.
This is like a 25, 26-year-old, right? Like this is a full-grown adult, and they're yelling at somebody else. They're yelling at another player, and they went up to ask the shop if they had X card, I don't remember, and they went and they checked. It took maybe 5 minutes, and the person was standing there like tapping their foot like, what's going on? And I'm like, this is a store. You gotta calm down here. And I say things to people because it always freaks them out a little bit, right? Like, what's this stranger talking to me for? Like, no, I'm gonna hold you accountable. You want to talk like a crazy person? I'm gonna treat you like a crazy person. And then they kind of don't do it anymore. And that's not something I recommend, right? That can get people into dangerous situations. And I don't advocate for getting people into dangerous situations. I don't want anyone to get themselves into a dangerous situation. I wanted to preface, I'm willing to go up to talk to strangers because I know, and I'm 6 feet tall, and I've a big, loud, expressive voice. I can do that, right? I can go and do that to people.
So if you're 5 foot, lean, no muscle on you or anything, though, you may suggest differently then.
I would suggest maybe a little bit of a softer approach. Like, hey man, I heard what you were saying from over there. I don't really appreciate you talking to that person that way. Right?
And mind you, for viewers, we're not suggesting at all, regardless of your stature, any violence or anything. It's just a matter of, No, when it comes to confrontations, how do you approach that person?
I always start with respect and kindness and willingness to understand and to forgive, right? Because you never know. Someone might be having a bad day and they lost their temper. And I have gone up to people like, hey, man, that wasn't super cool. They're like, oh, man, you're right, man. Like, let me go apologize. That's happened more often than not where... I'll get matched up with that person the next round. I'm like, hey, I heard you talking to that other person. Like, are you all right? Like, are you okay? Right? And that kind of makes it less of a confrontation and more of like, hey, I'm looking out for you. Right?
Yeah.
And I don't want anyone listening to incite violence or go be nasty to somebody else.
Please no. For the first episode,
Please.
we're being very clear
Please
about on this
don't do
channel.
that.
We do not support
No,
that.
no, I don't. I don't want anyone getting themselves hurt.
Yeah.
Physically, emotionally. That's not something I want everyone to have a good time.
Right.
That's the
The
most
point of
bottom
these
line.
competitions is to have number one fun first, and then if you can win, sure, but ultimately have fun first, be a good person, all of those staples, right? And because in the end, again, we keep having to remind ourselves sometimes this is just a card game. Sometimes it makes me feel bad to say that because for me it feels like it's so much more. But in terms of like what's at stake, sometimes I think it's good to remind yourself of that. So, yeah. Let me ask you another question here. So, can you tell me a little bit about the current deck, if you're willing to share? What are you running with now, and why have you chosen that deck?
I've been looking forward to this question all day. All day, I've been looking forward to this question. So, I'm running right now. I'm running Voiceless Voice.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, that's what's sitting in my deck box right now. Voiceless Voice and Dinomorphia, two of my I really love those decks, and I have a whole binder on my desk of other decks at the ready, right? I have 15, 20 something. I don't recommend everyone do this. I've been slowly collecting cards over a long period of time. Please don't go buy cards on a whim. Please don't do that. It's not a good idea.
Right.
But having now played, and I like to stick in the middle of power level for decks. I think that the cards then inherently are strong, but you have to sit down and learn about them and what makes them powerful and being able to play to their strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll use Dinomorphia as a better example because that brings me a lot of joy playing Dinomorphia.
And also educate me as much as I am trying to get familiar with as many as the archetypes that are out there, right? What is it, 13,000 cards or something like that?
Yeah, something crazy like that.
Yeah, so I have to say I'm less familiar with these different archetypes, so I'm interested to know kind of like what are the general mechanics behind it and what those do.
Absolutely. So Dinomorphia is more of a trap-based deck.
Okay.
A lot of the traps half your life points as cost, and then whether they are a counter trap to negate a monster effect trap or to fuse. It's a fusion strategy.
Okay.
Within your extra deck, you have Dinomorphia Kentragina, which can banish your normal Dinomorphia traps from your graveyard and copy their effect. Unfortunately, it ends on a towers that is also a floodgate. Dinomorphia Rextrum, what he basically accomplishes is your opponent cannot activate monster effects with attack points greater than your life points. So if I say get my life points down to 50, right, and you want to special summon Snake Eye Ash, you cannot activate the effect of Snake Eye Ash. And to me, I find that really exciting because it's your life points become one other resource, right? Now, of course, the issue is go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the issue from what it sounds like it's a high risk, high reward because how much life points do you have left, and that's what keeps you in the game.
Exactly. Then you do run the risk of someone going, okay, Sparks, I'm going to burn you for 800 and you lose the game, right? And of course the deck in and of itself has protection from effect damage and from battle damage, but how do you then manage your life points as a resource, right? How do you, where do you activate now? That opens up the thing for cards like Solemn Judgment, right? Solemn Judgment, Solemn Strike. A card I hold near and dear to my heart. It's a newer card, Iron Thunder, right? Everyone knows you set Imperm, you flip it face up, you got the Imperm column, right? Iron Thunder does something similar. When you flip it face up, it's Solemn Judgment, right? You pay half your life points to negate the activation of a monster, spell, or trap. There's one more sentence which gets me every single time I play this card or I see this card. It destroys whatever card it negated and its adjacent zones.
Oh, I didn't even realize that. Okay.
Right, and since I've been teaching my partner how to play, they've been playing Dinomorphia, and every single time they flip up Iron Thunder, and I'm playing Voiceless Voice, they get, usually it's Skull Guardian, and then two of my continuous spell and traps. And it's like, you've broken my board with one trap card, and I'm out of the game now. The rest of my train of thought, I think it's the reason I've been so excited to talk about this is I think a lot of players get hung up on playing one deck. That's right. Learning one deck is super important. You got to be good at it, right? I think that's important. I also think it's just as important, if not more, to explore other decks. Maybe not as in depth as your own, because then you're wasting time, right? On a deck you're not playing, but knowing what, at least like the meta decks, right? Whatever 8, 9, 10 decks are relevant. Knowing what those cards do and what your opponent is trying to accomplish can win you the game, right?
Because their strategy. As soon as you see a card, you're like, oh, that deck profile? Okay, then I know how to go against this.
I know what you're trying to do, and not every deck has a specific choke point where if I use Effect Veiler or I use Infinite Impermanence on this card, their turn stops, right? Not every deck has that. But if you know what your opponent is attempting to accomplish, even just vaguely, right, you are more likely to be able, going second at least, to break through their board, right? To give yourself a fighting chance. And I think that a lot of players get so into their own decks, and it's very important to learn the ins and outs of your decks and very small niche micro interactions with your own deck. I think that's very important. But if you don't know what people are playing, how are you really supposed to win, right? Are you just going to rely on your own skill and your own prowess as a player? I want to give myself as much of a chance to win as possible, right?
Yeah. That makes me think of a good example I can think of right now is think of the game chess, right?
It's very chess.
Say again?
I'm agreeing with you. I apologize.
Okay. No, you're good. I just want to make sure I heard you clearly. Chess is one of those games that the same pieces that you have are the same pieces that your opponent have, and the function of each piece are identical. So what those mechanics are. Where Yu-Gi-Oh! Is different is that imagine if you can switch out the pieces on a chessboard with brand new pieces that have different abilities. And if you're not educated on what each of those new pieces are, you are at that disadvantage because you don't know how to respond. At any time I'm playing against a player where it's like, oh, there's a horse deck. Okay, well, I kind of know the ins and outs of that deck and where its choke points are. But if I'm playing against something I've never seen before, that's where I get the most anxiety. I'm like, oh crap, I hope that this isn't something that if I don't do a proper negate at the right time, then that's it, because I wasn't aware. So, yeah. But go ahead, continue. I apologize.
No, I think you make a great point, and it's a part of the game that not a lot of people tend to think about, right? And it's usually in that, because upper level players think about that, right? Think about those kinds of things, right? I will watch POC TCG or Team Samurai X1 or even Sunseed Jess, right? Or Farfa. They talk about new cards with a lot of knowledge and experience behind their words because they know how they're going to interact with other cards, right? But going to even, and not everyone can go to YCSs. I certainly can't. I can't. But going to the regional level or even the local level, right? It's it puts you over those other players knowing what their deck does and your deck, because they might not. They spend so much time testing and refining their own deck, which is good. But if I normal summon, say, low Prayers of the Voiceless Voice, and you've never seen that card before, you go, huh? Huh? And you said it perfectly. You're at that disadvantage. I have pieces in my deck that you have no concept of, and that makes it a lot harder. And so that brings me to something I had let you know about before, playing other decks. I love playing a million decks at once. It challenges me to be able to think differently about the game, right? Instead of getting almost autopilot in my deck, like, this is the combo, and if someone stops me here, then this is the combo, right? And getting very spreadsheet-esque. I think a lot of players get kind of tunnel visioned in the spreadsheet mindset, right? Where they see the spreadsheet and they go, okay, I'm going to memorize all these different combos and the different pathing. But if you're playing 2, 3, 4 decks, there isn't as much time for that, right? So it's much more active learning, right? Instead of memorization.
Yep.
And I think that has helped me at least adapt to some more strange situations in the game, right? Or some less favorable matchups for any of my given decks. I think that makes it. Go ahead.
No. I agree with that. I think you said something to me. It was that word kinetic, because I do a lot of the same thing. I try to play different decks. Now, I will say I use like platforms like YG Omega to try to study other decks, to understand them. And a great example of like kind of the anxiety I got, similar feeling, was, so when I mentioned that I was going to be doing this podcast and it was announced, I had a good amount of people who wanted to be on this podcast. And when I had that question on the application of like, what decks do you want to, or do you use? What do you like? And I saw the list of them, and I just kept thinking to myself, like, after like taking all the applications and seeing all the decks together and archetypes, I was like, holy crap, I have a lot of studying to do, because some of these I didn't even know. Because last thing I wanted was to go on a podcast and someone starts talking to me about an archetype I haven't heard before, and then I can't hold a conversation with them. But then I realized, like, no, that's actually maybe a good opportunity, because like I told you, I am not familiar when it comes to Voiceless, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing it, Dinomorphia, what was the name of it?
Dinomorphia.
Morphia. I just missed the A. You see, guys, I'm learning, but I think that's great, because it gives the opportunity to talk about it and learn more. But yeah, I agree. Like, you should try to play these, even if it's at basic, a simulator, so that way you understand the mechanics of what those decks are, because I think it will only make you better. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but
I do, absolutely. I think even just being willing to admit that you don't know, right? That's like, I remember I had sat down, I went to Infinite Forbidden preview. I hadn't really looked at the set list too closely, and I sit down across a guy who I've played against multiple times. I know is very good, right? I know he's a very powerful duelist. So I in my mind have a very high expectation of what he's going to play. And I don't know if you've ever seen these cards, but the White Forest cards,
heard but not played or seen.
So I hadn't seen. I think it's really cool looking at it now, but the main focus of the deck is to send set spells and traps to the graveyard to activate your monster effects. And I think that's fantastic. I think it's really cool. I think it allows you to use your face down cards that then have effects if they're sent from the field to grave by a monster, right? It allows for a lot of cool synergies, right? And I had never looked at those cards before. So he sits down and he starts going, and I was taken aback. I was like, whoa, what do you mean you're setting it and you're sending it and you're special summoning? Whoa, what do you mean? Let me read this. Hold on. And at least recently, that was the first time I was like, well, I don't know what's going on, right? And I was sitting there thinking about it, And I was proud of myself. I am gonna brag a little bit. I was like, that's the first time I didn't know what was going on in a while. Because before I went, even to started going to locals, all right, what's meta? What are people tending to be playing? What do they look like? How does it work? And I hadn't done my due diligence, and my opponent, he blew me out of the water. 0-2, he killed me in those 2 games in maybe 5 minutes total.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really hits my point home. If you aren't willing to do that due diligence when it comes to new cards, but even getting into the game, right? This can even be on a beginner level. If you're not willing to go and look at what people could be playing at that moment, you're doing yourself a disservice, right? And it's not fun getting blown out of the way. You lose, right? You put up a good fight, it happens, right? But just absolutely getting destroyed is very discouraging.
Yeah. That's very true. I haven't had too much rage quitting on my end on Master Duel, but I won't lie and say that it hasn't happened, but yes. I think some of the funnest games that I've had, regardless if it's remote or Master Duel, but it's just because I spend more time playing online, is the games where it's a real grind. Like, you're just going and you're like, man, this can go either way at this point. And then when you still in the end come out on top, you're like, damn, that was close and that was fun. Or even if you lose, you still have that appreciation of like, damn, I lost, but that was fun,
Absolutely. I think Master Duel is a good place for that. Like, I don't know if you are familiar with the Paleozoic cards, but they're trap cards that they have their normal effects, and then when you activate a normal trap card, you can special summon them from the graveyard. Right? And I think that deck specifically desires that. It is very back and forth, right, with my opponent, and it's very like, all right, I have 5 cards set face down. How am I going to use these, right? How am I going to actually interact with my opponent's deck so that I can win? And it's very back and forth, and those games that do go back and forth, it almost feels like you're in the anime, right?
Yeah. It feels like there's bigger stakes on the line than what there is. You're like, but this is cool.
And I think that those games are more fun. 100%. I agree with you. Those games are a lot more fun, even if you do lose them.
Yeah, you still get some enjoyment out of it. Well, last question I had, and I'm happy to talk more about any topics that you want to talk about after this question. I wanted to ask you, is there any archetype today that you are looking forward to or wish would have support so that way it would have a better chance competing in the meta?
Absolutely. Absolutely, of course, there since it has been the year of the fire, I have been hoping and wishing for more Brotherhood of the Fire Fist support. Now, this deck, if you don't know, is a little bit older, around like 2017, 2018 era of Yu-Gi-Oh! So it's slow, right? It's Beast Warrior, and Winged Beast, those tri-types, kind of pre-Tri-Brigade era, and they almost weave through all of the different extra deck mechanics with Xyz summoning, fusion summoning, synchro summoning, just having and a lot of their gameplay is the continuous spell and traps, right? And I've been wanting almost like, I don't know if you're up to date on what has released in the OCG or is releasing, but one of the older dinosaur archetypes, Jirak, is getting new support, right? Or even the Raid Raptor support, right? The big Winged Beast pile deck. That would just bring me a lot of joy, right? To kind of put down these Beast Warrior monsters that have these big fiery animal spirits behind them, and to kind of use my continuous spells and traps as different resources and different extenders. But also, I with the onset of faster gameplay, I don't really think that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But something I have been wanting to play, or I don't know if you know the Vsauce Starfrost kind of decks, like Tearlaments, Kashtira, Manadeum.
I'm very familiar with Tearlaments and Kashtira.
Yes.
Unfortunately, nothing against the players, but they seem to be my kryptonite when I play against those type of decks.
That is completely understandable. And the last archetype, Scareclaw. The Scareclaw strategy is to put down a big Link 3 that occupies the extra monster zone that puts all of the monsters into face-up defense position. And your little Scareclaw monsters give your boss monster extra effects. Scareclaw Tryheart is the big boss monster. And I thought that was really cool. I really enjoyed that kind of little guys helping out the big guy. I don't know what about it, but it gave me a lot of enjoyment sitting down and being like, this is my big boss monster and I'm gonna get you. Right? Some more support for like the lore archetypes, because and I am not saying we need more branded support, because I can hear that in the back of my head. Well, what about branded? It's a lore. No, we don't need any more branded support. The deck is fine. But like, I would, and this is more of a general overarching statement, I would like that era of Yu-Gi-Oh, right? From like 2015 to like 2021, 2022 Yu-Gi-Oh, to kind of be put back into modern Yu-Gi-Oh. And I understand there are retro formats of every kind of format in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. But I wish more of the older decks were viable now. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think that would get a lot of people who stopped playing
to come back.
To come back, right? A lot of people who did play Yu-Gi-Oh might still watch YouTube videos, or might even, right, like go to locals with their buddies, but they don't actually play, right? Or people who want to interact with Yu-Gi-Oh, but don't have anything they want to play.
Do you know, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm just curious, out of curiosity, do you happen to know how old like Makonko is by any chance?
Not off the top of my head. I do have a buddy who is a big Makonko player.
Mm-hmm.
And let me take a look.
No, I was you don't have to. I was just wondering, because like that's one of those decks where that's where I found out about like crashing into your opponent and causing them damage. Like, wow, this is really cool. Until I later discovered Yubel. But I think because I have this attachment to that idea of learning that new mechanic, I really loved it. It was like, oh, this would be so cool if one day this got a little bit more support, because especially since it has the dependency of being equipped, right, to a spell or trap card, I think puts it at a little bit of a disadvantage, especially with just with the different types of cards that are out there today. So like when you said that, I'm like, yeah, that would be interesting to see some of these different types of archetypes. Again, don't know if Makonko falls into that category of what you're saying from like 2015 and such, but I'm sure that there are other archetypes like you're mentioning that it would be cool for people to play them again, just because of how much they love them. And hey, here's a brand new card that puts in a little bit of a twist, but gives you that feeling of enjoyment again to play it again, while still being able to feel confident that you're at least going to have somewhat of a chance playing in a competitive standpoint, or even casual, because even when it comes to casual cards, sometimes I see so much meta being played, even just casual games,
Absolutely. And I did go ahead and check. I opened my phone right up, and even like the Makonko came out in 2023 with the Pearly cards.
Oh wow! So not old at all. Okay, my bad, guys.
No, but I think that actually brings up a really good point, in that cards that are just a year old, not even, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
have it up on Yu-Gi-Oh! Neuron, which is a fantastic app that I use constantly. No, oh, sorry, I can't read. January 2023, so almost 2 years old, and I don't know anyone still playing Pearly. There's the one guy at locals that I go to, um, but you don't really see people playing these year-old cards, these 2-year-old cards, because the brand new cards are so exponentially more explosive. Is the word
Right.
I was trying to put the sentence together. It didn't quite work. My apologies.
No, no, no. That I know what you mean. Explosive in the sense of that it's just able to do so much more. And I know we're using Mikanko as an example, but please, anyone listening, take any other deck that has this issue that it's not that old of a deck, but when you try to play against these other decks today that are in the meta, it just has a hard time with keeping up and trying to do it. It's not to say that you can't win, but I think in terms of your win rate, I think you're going to see a lower win rate compared to others. And I think going back to our other conversation about just having a deck that is fun to play with, I think it's great when people can just say, you know what, I don't care what my win rate is going to be. I just want to play this deck because it's fun. Those are the kind of people I think it's great for them, but it would be just awesome to give them some additional support. Just like, hey, here's one or two more cards that suddenly makes a huge shift in the game. Like, oh, that's awesome. You know?
So I 100% agree with you. I think, and of course, we're talking about Konami. They want to make a lot of money. They make the new cards and they want to sell. I understand that, and I do. My confusion then is why not give those kinds of archetypes, right, continuous support? Maybe not, so long as Snake Eyes has been, right? Just a constant, insane support. But like you said, one card, two card, maybe even three cards, right? That just give it that little bit more, just a little bit, right?
Right.
I think people would be much more willing to invest in the primary market,
I
right?
have the solution. I have the
Oh,
solution.
let's
I want
hear
to
it.
get your opinion on it. You tell me what you think about this. This might be controversial. If you guys listening or watching have your thoughts on it, please share. Let me know. I always thought Konami has a great way to be able to beta test nuke cards. And if they're already doing this, someone let me know. But you have Master Duel. Who's to say before they start printing all these copies on all these cards and making all of these announcements, they release beta versions of cards on Master Duel and see how people are playing them and if they like them. And if they do, they say, hey, you know what? We have enough people who are playing this card on Master Duel. Why don't we include this in the next actual physical card release? Because that way, when someone goes and buys your next tin, because I know there's some people that are not happy with the new one that just came out. Or when they just come out with a new booster pack or anything, just you already know that what you're selling in that product is going to be something that people want. So test it first in a digital standpoint. If people like it, then allow them to purchase it in real life, and that way they can make that choice for that investment. I don't know. What do you think? Where are the problems? Tell me the pitfalls on that one.
I think that's a fantastic idea to begin, right? Like the competitor in me, right, would love that. I think that'd be fantastic. And I think it would draw a lot of people to Master Duel, draw a lot more people to Master Duel. And it would even if you don't necessarily getting into the more of the specifics, even if you don't necessarily, right, you sequester off the newer cards in, right, a Duelist Cup type area, right, where you have a different ban list, or right, only the new cards, right, or whatever subsection of cards. I think that would really, people would enjoy it, right? I know I would, right? I'd be able to justify then sitting at my computer for 3 hours playing Master Duel, right? I
Yeah.
could justify it then.
And
And
you
then-
only have it for a month. I think you're right. Like you do it like a cup, like some sort of monthly thing. You leave it open. Here are the new cards, and Konami can capture all. You telling me that Konami doesn't have the ability to know what cards are in
people
what
are playing?
person's decks and how
Absolutely.
often they're playing it? They capture all that data. There's no way they don't, right? Mind you, I'm not saying that that's what they actually do or they don't. I'm just saying for privacy purposes, I don't actually know. That's my assumption, though, is what I'm saying.
They do actually capture that data. If I don't know if you've ever watched a replay on Master Duel,
Yeah.
but when you do, I don't know if you notice, but at the top right corner, it tells you the percentage of the percentage of people using that card, how many copies,
Oh, the usage rate. Yep.
The usage rate, exactly. So they do have that data. The game records. You can even just going back and looking at the game you just played. The game captures that data.
Yeah.
I then you almost dissuade people from going to the secondary market to buy singles,
Yep.
right? Like my buddy earlier today sent me his TCG player card of $300, right? And I have sitting in my room now a case of the tins, which was about $180. There's no way I'm gonna get everything I want out of this case of 12 tins.
Yeah.
It is all but now. I think the card pool of 400 cards in the tins is a little obscene.
Yep.
I have my own complaints. I'm sure everyone listening or watching has plenty of complaints. But I like the tins. I like what they stand for. They stand for lowering the barrier to entry for competitive players. I also like the prismatic secret rares. It's my favorite rarity personally. I think they look the coolest. That and ultimate rare from the OTS packs. Those are my favorite rarities personally. But I bought the tins. That was my personal decision. But when someone tells me, I don't like what Konami did with the tins, I'm not going to buy them. That makes sense. That is a perfectly fair
and mind you,
valid
I wouldn't
reason.
knock anyone for that decision for buying the tins. I think however someone wants to spend their money is fine, and it's no judgment. And I would even say, looking at those tins, there were cards already okay, M-Seti, Chaos Angel. I already own those. I don't need any more of those. So therefore I have less of a reason to buy them. So the only card in that list that I could think of at the moment that I really wanted was SP Little Knight. And I end up, and maybe this is going to bring up another controversy, I pre-ordered a single copy of that card from a buyer I've already used before in the past, because I'm like, I don't want to spend a whole bunch of money on all these tins to hope to get one card. I rather pay the price I did pay for that single, which was still expensive, not as much as an SP Knight, now. But I just did that pre-order because I was like, I just want that one card. That's it. I don't want anything else. But if you're someone who doesn't have any of those, I agree. That's where you can have that potential advantage to capture some more of those, maybe.
And I like to lean into the trading aspect. I love to trade with people. And not everyone has a place to go trade with people. I understand that. I like going up to people, hey man, you got some trades? You got some trades, man? And I love trading with people, right? So I used to have a Chaos Angel and a Crimson Dragon and the Horus cards. I wasn't personally playing them, and none of my friends wanted to play them, so I traded them away, right? I traded them for things I wanted. Now with the tins, with those Horus cards, to use your example, I now have a chance to get them back, right?
Yeah.
The tins then become more valuable for me, so then I've gotten double what I wanted, and so has somebody else.
Yeah, I would have trader's remorse, not buyer's remorse, but trader's remorse. I'm like, hey, yeah, I'll trade with you, but I'm like, I miss my M-Seti, So
I absolutely know what you mean, and it does feel kind of bad. I had 2 M-Seti and 2 King Sarcophagus, and I traded them away, and now my buddy, he wants to play Tear Lament, and I think that's fantastic. I think trying new decks and different playing Yu-Gi-Oh on a different axis is always fun. I think it breathes new life into your excitement of the game, right? But going back to your original question, I think that would draw a lot more people into the gacha aspect of Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Opening product and be willing to put that money into the primary card market, right? Which I think, right? You pre-ordered SP Little Knight, right? From TCG Player, from whomever, right? I don't blame you. Not in the slightest, right? You need that one card, you spend whatever, $40 or $50, boom, it comes in the mail, right? I think if say they split the card pool for the tins in half, they made two, right? Would you, now I'll ask you a question, do you think if instead of 400 cards, it was like the 20, the previous year's tins, would you then go, you know what, this is worth my while, right? Yeah. I'm more likely to get the SP, and now I've pulled, I didn't have any, say you pull Tearlam's Cashier, right now you pulled two of those, right? It's more worth your while, right? Yeah. Would that be a better solution than going online and buying it if they fix some of the issues, right? Would you be more willing to invest in the primary market? That's what I'm wondering.
Good question. So let's put it this way. My decision to pull the trigger and do the pre-order on SP was because if this is the best chance I have to get this within a year, and that's what I'm saying, within a year, I think that this was the best decision. Because if my other option was to wait until the next thing that comes out where it'll be included in, how long is that going to take? I don't have I'm not going to a competition like this week or anything else. And to be honest, I probably didn't need to have to even do the pre-order now. I could have waited till later, until it's been out in the market and, whatever the price may be to stabilize where it is. But I was like, I'm just going to do this now because, one, I know I will use it. And even if I just play it in a casual setting, at least I have it and it's behind me. But if it were more the traditional, what is it, 200 instead of the...
it's like 100 to 200 range that I've seen.
And if it's somewhere in between that, let's call in the middle 150 then, right? Let's say if it was 150, then I probably would have been, let me buy this because I do like buying those things. I do like opening up the product. It is an experience. Though I do have to say, however, they waste so much space in their packaging. I tend not to be someone to be like, oh, well, the environment, don't get me wrong, climate change is important, but I don't put a lot of stock of the initial thought of things being whether it's environmentally friendly or not. Damn, that is a lot of wasted space in a big tin. I guess it's good for people to just throw their cards in there if they don't have a deck box or something. But to answer your question, yes, I would potentially delay the satisfaction of having SP Little Knights sooner by buying more tins on occasion as time went on. But because the chances just didn't seem good, I think what was it? People were saying that what was it? Age of Overlords, that's where SP was in originally? Do I have that right?
You do. Okay.
You had a better chance of getting SP Little Knight by buying boxes of those than you did necessarily the tins. That's at least how I understood it. It was I'm going to just do the pre-order.
And that's true, right? That statement is true, right? If you look at, I'm not a big math person. I think math is confusing. But if you look at the pull rates and the percentages, I'm sure there are a million people who could articulate this more clearly than I'm about to. And my apologies, but you are unfortunately more likely if you went and bought, let's say, a case, 12 boxes of Age of Overlord than a case of the tins to get at least one, maybe even two SP Little Knights, right? And back then, it was much more worth your while, right? At least when Age of Overlord first came out. But that was a crazy time when, right? Age of Overlord pre-ban list, that was a crazy time in Yu-Gi-Oh! But But yes, I do wish, truly and genuinely in my heart, that something is done about, because the tins are disappointing, right? I haven't opened mine yet. I'm waiting for a buddy. but it's still.
And then you're gonna open yours. You're gonna find your SP Little Mine. Like, I'm not disappointed anymore.
But even, and I had purchased the tins prior to finding out how bad the pull rates were and whatever. But there is still a pretty good chance I don't get what I want, and that stinks.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure plenty of other people can agree with me. It sounds like you agree with me that why spend $160 if you're not going to get the $40 card you want when you can just go spend the $40 and you don't have all of the rest of the ultras.
Save yourself $80 and you get exactly what you need.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
So Konami, if you're listening, we've come up with a solution for you. You can contact my people.
Solution.
My people will talk with your people. But the end result is just beta test your things first on Master Duel, see how people like it, and then make it into the real product, right? Well, that would be crazy to see. That'd be cool if they actually did that. I'd hope they give me a shout out later.
That would be insane. I 100% agree.
Awesome. Well, I know we've talked a lot. And like I said, I didn't really have any more questions, but I wanted to open it up to you. Is there any topics? I know that you were looking forward to jumping on this podcast. And again, thank you for your time, being very generous with it. Was there any topics that you wanted to talk about or share with our listeners?
I do. This isn't necessarily a new topic, just something I would like to re-articulate with barrier to entry, right? And being willing and able to like slow your roll almost. At least at locals, right? At the local level, casual level, you're going to a regional, you're going to a YCS, you're playing to win.
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? I if you don't know how to play the game, going to those types of events, I would strongly advise against. Absolutely.
Delay it until you get some air under your wings.
Absolutely. But you're going to locals, you're going to your local card shop, and you see a kid with no card sleeves, he's got a paper mat, his dad is with them, or it's a girl and her mom is with her. I think it would be in all of our best interest, the community as a whole, the Yu-Gi-Oh community, to just step on the brakes a little bit, right? I myself am trying to cook up a beginner series to Yu-Gi-Oh, but I'm terrible at writing scripts. I'm no good at it.
Well, now you know a guy with the production who can help you with that.
That's not a bad idea. That might have to be something that I reach back out to you for. But that's a different venture for a different day. Yeah. I just want at least everyone to take this into their hearts. Be willing, and not everyone's the greatest teacher, but just to slow down, right? It's Yu-Gi-Oh! So fast now. It's incredibly complex. Be willing to be like, is everything good, right? Double checking with your opponent. Does that make sense, right? Do you have any questions, right? If it's very clear that your opponent doesn't know what's really going on, right? And we've talked about all of the different telltale signs. And, if someone comes in with a paper mat, maybe they haven't bought a cloth mat yet. Maybe they don't have a new mat. But and I love to make fun of my friends as much as the next person, but you never know. You never know. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, then they whip out a U-Bell fiend spit.
Yeah, then they normal summon Samsara D Lotus and you lose the game. You're like, that's what happens.
Yeah.
But that was all I had to say. I thank you for having me on here. Of course, this is the first that I've done something like this, so I really appreciate you listening to me and you being willing to have me on. And
it's been a great conversation. You've been very humble. You've been very welcoming, and that was one of the things I was nervous about, is bringing on people. I know that there was going to be people with opinions, but whether they were going to be aggressive or humble, I was never sure. and I always wanted to make sure that I leave the vacuum open to say whatever they want, but I do have to say that this has been a great conversation. I'm glad that we had the opportunity to do this. So, but let me ask you, do you have any social media that you do want to promote or platform? So if anyone does want to have a chance to connect with you, or is on the Discord the best way? What's best for you?
I will plug my Discord and my Twitter. My Discord, I'm a big Beetle person. I don't know if you saw that with my Discord.
Oh, yeah.
Just Hercules Beetle on Discord. I'm always willing to talk to new people, play, whatever. This is gonna sound silly. I was a big Branded player when I made my Twitter. So just at Branded Despia on Twitter if you want to reach out to me, talk some game, whatever. Shoot me a message, absolutely. I will be making a YouTube soon. I haven't done that yet, but it's in the works.
Awesome. And if we hear about it, I'll be sure to give a shout out on the future episodes once you got some content rolling and go there. So that's awesome. Well, thank you again so much. I deeply appreciate your time. Thank you again for everything.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for being willing to listen to me ramble. And if you ever need me to come back, you want some help, you have some ideas you want to shoot, I'm always open. I'm always willing to talk any day.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for watching this episode of Back to Battle City, the podcast. Again, we'd love to hear your thoughts on everything that we talked about. If you have some thoughts, please share them down in the comment section below. Also, to stay informed with any new episodes or clips that we might be doing, please do me a favor, hit the like and the subscribe button, and that way you can be notified. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in the near future.